watching L24 Nightly News with me, Mariam Zian, to the headlines. Hunger claims the lives of no fewer than 122 people in Gaza. Urgent appeals to allow the entry of aid and open humanitarian corridors emerge, along with demands for an investigation into the crime of starvation. And the UN says more than 1 million children are at risk of famine. Coming up, dozens of martyrs and wounded in horrific Israeli massacres that the occupation forces continue to commit in Gaza. Hamas and other Palestinian factions expressed astonishment at Witkoff's statements, reaffirming their flexibility in negotiations, while Trump said Hamas does not truly want to reach an agreement. Next, in Morocco, human rights and political groups warn against the royal palace's attempts to pass legislation that would protect corruption in its barons, while activists sound the alarm over the growing threats posed by Moroccan-Israeli normalization. And Zelensky announces the start of talks to arrange a meeting with Putin. The Kremlin states that a Putin-Zelensky meeting would only take place as a final step toward peace. Turkish president reveals his intention to coordinate a meeting between Putin and Trump in Istanbul. Hello and welcome to your nightly news. First, the Ministry of Health in Gaza has reported that hospitals in the region recorded 9 new deaths due to famine and malnutrition in the past 24 hours. The ministry confirmed that the total number of deaths due to famine and malnutrition has risen to 122 martyrs, including 83 children. The government media office in Gaza called for an immediate end to the famine, an opening of all crossings to save what can be salvaged from the humanitarian catastrophe being perpetrated by the occupation in the Gaza Strip. In a statement, the office emphasized the need to form an international commission to investigate the crime of systematic starvation and to arrest the war criminals of the Zionist occupation in all countries around the world, bringing them to fair international trials.
We demand an immediate halt to the famine, the opening of all crossings, the immediate delivery of infant formula, and the entry of 508 trucks, along with 50 fuel trucks daily. Perhaps with these efforts, we can save whatever can be saved from this humanitarian catastrophe that is being perpetrated by the occupation, broadcast live with sound and images. We also demand the formation of an international committee to investigate the crime of systematic starvation, and we call for the arrest of war criminals, leaders, officers and soldiers by all countries and their prosecution in fair international courts.
Dr. Mohammed Abu Afash, the director of the Medical Relief Association in Gaza, called on the international community and humanitarian organizations to urgently intervene to end the genocide and halt famine in the Gaza Strip. In a statement made to L24 News, Abu Afash said that tens of thousands of patients are suffering from severe complications due to the lack of medicine.
We witness our starving children dying in our hands every day. We appeal to all conscious minds to allow the creation of a humanitarian corridor to evacuate our wounded. We are talking about 12,000 who need surgeries outside the Gaza Strip. These people die every day, their wounds constantly inflamed. The suffering inside Gaza is immense.
And the UN warned that more than 1 million children in the Gaza Strip are bearing the brunt of the deepening starvation and malnutrition as humanitarian access remains severely restricted by the Zionist entity. Haq said the aid brought into the enclave in the last 2 months is nowhere near sufficient to meet people's survival needs.
People are starving. More than 2 million people are starving, including, as Edie pointed out, journalists, including, as I just pointed out a few minutes ago, our own personnel. They're starving because food is not getting in. If this situation doesn't clear up, if this does not get better soon, and more aid go through all the various checkpoints, people will die. We've been saying this for months, and now we're at the point where, in fact, people are dying.
The United Nations and humanitarian organizations have warned that Gaza is on the brink of running out of specialized therapeutic foods essential for treating children with severe malnutrition and saving their lives. Salim Mouis, the regional spokesperson for the United Nations Children's Fund, said in statements reported by Reuters that the organization is now facing a critical situation where therapeutic supplies are running low, warning of the grave danger this poses to children suffering from hunger and malnutrition.
Aid and humanitarian supplies inside the Gaza Strip are running out. UNICEF has already ran out of preventive nutritional supplies, and now we are facing a dire situation that we are running out of therapeutic supplies. We only have 3,000 cartons. That's equivalent of treating only 3,000 children, and that's really dangerous for children as they face hunger and malnutrition at the moment.
And the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip live through the harrowing reality of hunger in all its details, a daily bloody scene in which children are the most tragic victims, succumbing one after another due to malnutrition. This dire situation unfolds against the backdrop of a collapse in healthcare system and the ongoing occupation siege that suffocates every essential aspect of life. Nabil Khazini has the report.
The scenes coming from Gaza these days show clearly that what the enclave is witnessing is not a mere crisis, it's a death sentence. Hunger here is no longer just a feeling, it's a shadow that never fades away. People here in Gaza are not starving just for food, they are starving for life itself. The pots, the plates, the stomachs are all empty, and for so many babies, they never lived beyond their birth, dying hungry the same way as they came into the world.
Here's my pot. Doesn't even have a single crumb. I have a 2-year-old girl. I got back home with an empty pot to see my daughter screaming for having no food or bread. People here push each other and fight. A pot spilled on me and I was burned, so I left with nothing.
The United Nations Secretary General warned of an escalating humanitarian disaster in Gaza, highlighting the dire conditions of aid workers and traumatized children. He emphasized that the UN is prepared to seize any opportunity for a ceasefire to ramp up humanitarian efforts across Gaza.
The scale and scope is beyond anything we have seen in recent times. I cannot explain the level of indifference and inaction we see by too many in the international community. The lack of compassion, the lack of truth, the lack of humanity. Children speaking of wanting to go to heaven because at least they say there is food there. We hold video calls with our own humanitarians who are starving before our eyes. And this is not just a humanitarian crisis, it's a moral crisis that challenges the global conscience. We will continue to speak out at every opportunity, but words don't feed hungry children.
In the Gaza Strip, it's not only the sound of the occupation's bombs that can be heard, but also the cries of hunger. After more than 22 months of destruction, now people here are facing famine in one of the most horrific crimes of our time.
31 Palestinians have been martyred, including 4 from those waiting for aid and others injured following Zionist occupation airstrikes on several cities in the Gaza Strip since dawn Friday. Palestinian media reported that a drone strike on a tent sheltering displaced people at Al Rimad school killed 4 civilians and injured others, while another person was killed near the slaughterhouse area west of Khan Yunis. 6 more were killed in separate areas across the Strip amid ongoing Israeli bombardment. Many Palestinians were martyred on Friday morning following occupation forces' attack on civilians in the northwest of the Gaza Strip. Local Palestinian sources reported that the occupation forces opened fire on Palestinians seeking aid in the Al Sudaniya area in the northwest of the Strip. The victims were transferred to the hospital, where 4 of them were later announced martyred due to their critical injuries. And a journalist was killed and others were injured last night after Israeli occupation forces targeted the Al Yarmouk area in central Gaza City. Medical sources announced that journalist Adam Abu Harbid was killed when Israeli airstrikes hit his family's tent in the Yarmouk area. The sources added that the journalist's children sustained varying injuries as a result of the strike.
Adam,
who worked at the beginning of the war until this moment in documenting the crimes of the Israeli occupation, he is today assassinated by the Israeli occupation army, thinking that it is assassinating the voice of truth and that it is silencing this voice that has always exposed the crimes of the Israeli occupation. But we will definitely continue the mission of exposing the Israeli occupation crimes and its systematic targeting of our fellow journalists.
U.S. President Donald Trump reiterated the Israeli Prime Minister's claims that Hamas is not serious about reaching an agreement on Gaza, as he put it. In statements on Friday, Trump said that Hamas does not truly want to reach a deal. His remarks came a day after Trump's Middle East peace envoy Steve Witkoff announced that the U.S. administration had decided to recall its negotiating team for consultations following Hamas's response to Witkoff's proposal. It's also worth noting that Hamas and other Palestinian factions expressed astonishment and surprise at Witkoff's statements reaffirming their flexibility in negotiations.
Yeah, Gaza, they pulled out of Gaza. They pulled out in terms of negotiating. It was too bad. Hamas didn't really want to make a deal. I think they want to die. And it's very, very bad.
Are you done with
and it got to be to a point where you're going to have to finish the job. They really, they asked for things. Don't forget, we got a lot of hostages out. So now we're down to the final hostages. And they know what happens after you get the final hostages. And basically because of that, they really didn't want to make a deal. I saw that. So they pulled out and they're going to have to fight and they're going to have to clean it up. You're going to have to get rid of it.
The foreign ministries of Egypt and Qatar announced on Friday that some progress had been made in the latest intensive round of negotiations, which lasted 3 weeks, to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. In a joint statement, the two ministries said the negotiations were paused to allow for consultations before resuming the talks, considering this is a normal step given the complexity of the negotiations, affirming that they are continuing their intensive mediation efforts to reach an agreement that would put an end to the war in the Gaza Strip. Human rights organizations and political parties have warned of what they described as a serious legislative deviation pursued by the Moroccan authorities to protect the system of corruption. They accuse the government of undermining laws that safeguard rights and combat corruption while withdrawing those designed to fight it. The Executive Office of the Moroccan Human Rights Space stated that this legislative policy aims to shield the corruption network, enable the looting of public funds, and block any oversight, even minimal or partial, by civil society. It stressed that such measures violate the Moroccan constitution and international agreements, worsening the country's deteriorating situation, including undermining purchasing power by raising taxes and fees to offset deficits caused by public fund embezzlement.
Morocco is witnessing a dangerous and systematic legislative deviation and a new legislative policy that serves 3 basic goals. The first is to destroy constitutional rights and guarantees, and the second is to legitimize and punishment by disabling the tools of accountability and oversight, while the third is to strike the purchasing power of citizens in light of the official silence on fiscal evasion and suspicious deals amid a rise in public money squandering.
The Moroccan Observatory Against Normalization warned that the deepening normalization with the Israeli occupation poses a threat to the very essence of the Moroccan state, its identity, unity, history, and all of the foundations of its existence. The head of the observatory, Ahmed Wehman, called for the discussion or the dissolution of what is called the Moroccan-Israeli Parliamentary Friendship Committee, which he said was created without any political or moral legitimacy. He warned of its dangerous maneuvers targeting Morocco's identity, symbols, and sovereignty at their core.
We are facing an existential danger that threatens Morocco, not through the infiltration of the state institutions alone, but through the infiltration of the state spirit too. The infiltration targets our identity, unity, history, and future, as well as all the components of our existence. The Moroccan Zionist Friendship Committee was created outside any political or moral legitimacy. It constitutes a blatant betrayal to the values of the Moroccan people, its identity, and its historical position towards the Palestinian cause.
And Salma Mansouri, Secretary of State to the Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs in charge of African Affairs, reaffirmed on behalf of President Abdelmajid Tebboune Algeria's commitment to defending Africa's legitimate right to fair and permanent representation within the UN Security Council in accordance with the Sirte Declaration and the Ouzelwini Consensus. A statement from the Algerian Foreign Ministry explained that Mansouri, speaking via video conference on Friday, as the representative of the Algerian president at the 6th summit of the African Union Committee of 10 on UN security reform, stressed the need to unify the African stance and intensify efforts for a comprehensive reform that would restore balance to the international system on the principles of justice and equity. And Algeria, through its deputy permanent representative to the UN, Toufiq El-Eid Koudri, called for strengthening preventive diplomatic capacities to ease tensions and prevent their outbreak. In a statement during a UN Security Council briefing in New York on cooperation between the UN and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Algerian diplomat stressed that complex challenges facing international peace and security require deeper and more strategic cooperation, as well as stronger collaboration in counterterrorism and peacekeeping.
Strengthening peace and security requires deeper and more strategic cooperation in the face of the diverse and complex challenges facing international peace and security in today's world. Our capacity in preventive diplomacy must be significantly strengthened to ease mounting tensions and prevent conflicts before they erupt, especially in the developing world, where the consequences are often disastrous.
Algeria's Sonatrach Group and Libya's National Oil Corporation have signed 4 cooperation protocols in geophysics, well services, laboratory operations, and analysis, as well as training and knowledge transfer. The Algerian energy giant described the agreement as the outcome of extensive consultations and constructive cooperation between the two companies. The repeated actions and provocative behavior committed by the far right against Algeria have proven that the leaders of the far right, foremost among them Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau, have unilaterally taken control of political decision-making regarding Algerian-French relations. This constitutes a blatant affront not only to diplomatic norms and conventions, but also to the French institutions responsible for foreign affairs and relations with Algiers. Mohamed Khatil has more.
In less than a week, Paris has been the scene of 2 new incidents that overtly ran counter diplomatic norms. The first involved a direct attack on an official document issued by Algerian consulates for their citizens. The second occurred when accredited officials from the Algerian embassy in France were prevented from accessing restricted areas in Paris airports to handle diplomatic bags in violation of the fundamental principles of diplomatic protocol and disregarding Algerian sovereignty over its own diplomatic consignments. Both acts were initiated by the French Interior Minister in a worrying escalation orchestrated by Bruno Retailleau, a representative of the extremist far-right movement, who acted without consulting his own country's foreign ministry, which seems to be trapped in a constant conflict of opinions and a weakened governmental structure considered among the least popular in the history of the French republics. All of this took place under the silence of President Emmanuel Macron, who also suffered unprecedented low popularity ratings. The French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs, in charge of consular affairs and bilateral relations, has been absent during this crisis, leaving the door open to Retailleau. His actions, clearly deliberate, no longer surprise those who follow his career as leader of the Republican Party, which competes with Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella in the race to capture the far-right vote. In this context, he has resorted to attacking Algeria as a pillar of his early campaign for the 2027 presidential elections. His controversial decisions include attempting to expel Algerian citizens outside of legal frameworks, annulling visa exemptions for holders of Algerian diplomatic passports, and appointing staff to the French embassy in Algiers without respecting the diplomatic procedures in force between the two countries. All of these actions reflect a unilateral seizure of political control over Franco-Algerian relations by Retailleau, usurping functions that legally belong to other state institutions. In the face of these provocations, the Algerian government has responded firmly by strictly applying the principle of reciprocity. In this connection, it has made it clear that far-right leaders are pushing relations between Algeria and France to the point of no return. Retailleau's action regarding Algeria can no longer be considered simple diplomatic errors or passing crises. It has become clear that he and others, such as Le Pen, Bardella, and Darmanin, have chosen to deliberately jeopardize relations with Algeria for electoral purposes. This strategy has not only exacerbated the crisis between Algiers and Paris, but has also dragged President Macron into a situation of political uncertainty. Although these maneuvers are promoted by other actors, it is the President of the French Republic himself who must bear the political and diplomatic consequences.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that negotiators from Kiev and Moscow discussed the possibility of holding a direct meeting between him and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin with the aim of ending the war. Speaking to journalists on Friday, Zelensky stressed that his country needs a new step to end the war, which would most likely begin with a meeting between the leaders, adding that talks on this matter have already started and could lead to an anticipated meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. As a response, the Kremlin ruled out the possibility of holding a meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky within the next 30 days, describing it as unlikely in response to Kiev's proposal to hold a summit between the two presidents before August. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said in a press briefing that the war in Ukraine cannot be resolved within 30 days, adding that his country's ideas outlined in draft memoranda exchanged during the second round of talks fundamentally contradict the Ukrainian proposals. And Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said on Friday that he is likely to hold talks this week with his Russian and U.S. counterparts Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump to discuss the possibility of hosting a leaders' summit in Istanbul to address the war in Ukraine. Erdogan told reporters that his conversations with Putin and Trump this week would allow him to determine whether it is possible to bring the two presidents together in Istanbul. However, both sides remain divided over the conditions for a ceasefire and the potential holding of a high-level leaders' meeting. In Sudan, the army announced its full commitment to international humanitarian law and human rights during its military operations, stressing its keenness to protect civilians and distinguish them from military targets. Spokesperson for the Joint Force and Armed Struggle Movements, Ahmed Hussein Mustafa, added that army units are extremely careful to differentiate between military and civilian targets and to treat prisoners in accordance with the Geneva Conventions, providing them with proper health care. The Sudanese Transitional Sovereignty Council called for rejecting sectarian divisions, extremism, and radicalism in preaching, stressing the need to preserve social cohesion and national unity. Sovereignty Council member Selma Abdel Jabbar Al Mubarak, during a meeting with religious leaders and various community figures in White Nile State, urged the adoption of moderation in preaching, calling for greater efforts to raise public awareness and strengthen the moral and religious values of young people. The Balembesay Opera House in Algiers hosted a remarkable musical concert performed by a group of elite Russian musicians and singers. The concert, held in a refined artistic atmosphere under the title Piotr Tchaikovsky, Music Without Borders, was dedicated to the works of the great Russian composer on the occasion of the 185th anniversary of his birth. A large audience attended the event and enjoyed the musical pieces, affirming that this artistic initiative reflects the depth of cultural exchange between Algeria and Russia. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes tonight's bulletin. Thanks for tuning in and have a great night.